very, very dry times, this moorland is absolutely ripe for catching fire, and it will do so. And without enormous effort, controlling those fires is just extraordinary. I mean, we will get more fires because we've got the weather conditions becoming more and more ideal for wildfires, and also vegetation management is just being reduced and reduced and reduced.
A wildfire warning for Scotland as the UK faces its third heatwave this summer. We get the lowdown, and we also talk to drought-hit farmers in Yorkshire. Britain's biggest supermarket chain wants to engage more with growers. We speak to Tesco's new chief executive as he gets out on farm. And Louise visits Britain's first commercial olive grove in Lincolnshire. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Now straight to our top story, the weather. Too hot to handle again right now, with the UK in the grip of yet another heatwave. We'll go to Scotland in a moment, but first, Hugh, drought in Yorkshire and a sweltering Great Yorkshire show this week.
Yeah, and it's not surprising, Johann, when, I thought we've had it bad down here in Surrey, and we're sort of used to it because we get it most years in the south. But when you sit on the train, I got the train up, and I mean, no joke, you go from Doncaster to York, and there's like crops of maize that aren't even, 4 inches high, and they're just baked. I mean, they're not brown baked off, but they're just like standing cactuses. It's like, and there's no grass. It's really bad up there. And I think actually further north, and we're going to hear some audio now from Claire Wise, who farms near Darlington. Further north, it's even worse than what it is around York.
The reality is we haven't had any proper rain since the beginning of March. What little we've had has blown off as quick as it's landed. We're just desperate. We're feeding winter forage already. Just there's nothing to feed. We have a lot of people around us who are saying we've got no cash flow, we can't buy feed. They're offloading stock. There's a lot more geldewes coming out, and people are really worried.
So Claire, they're highlighting some of the struggles there around sort of Darlington and up in that north sort of east corner. I suppose 20 miles inland from the coast, it's just dry because in the hills they've had some rain, not masses, and in the sort of Cumbria side of the north they've had rain. Some would say they've had less than normal. But compared to what they haven't had, not since the beginning of March, they have had nothing. Had like one or two drops. And so they're in a position, I think what's unique about this situation, and we know the whole A1 corridor is the really worst affected. That said, there are also hotspots in Herefordshire. There are places, randomly where there has been no rain, like never before. But for me, it's when you hear those sort of stories of people in the northeast, they're not used to this. They're already through their winter forage. What little winter forage they made, they're through it. And they're offloading stock at an alarming rate. And the other issue is that, lambs are going to market, for example. There's plenty of 34 kilo lean lambs in some of the marts where there just isn't the grass to finish them.
Yeah, the Environment Agency is saying that North, East and Central England have had the driest March to June since records began in 1871. And taking England as a whole, Louise, it's been the driest start to the year across the country since drought-stricken 1976.
Oh, yes, I think it's affecting just about everybody now. I mean, obviously some areas, as Hugh said, are drier than others, but you can't go anywhere really without some people talking about how dry the conditions are. It's also, of course, been very hot again this week, and I think it's going to be very hot this weekend. We have seen and heard about an irrigation ban now in certain areas, and that's, with immediate effect. So for those people with high value crops in the ground, the vegetables, that's not very good news because they'll be looking at losing quite a bit of yield. I know that not many of the crops in the UK are irrigated, but for them, that's a really serious matter.
Well, groundwater levels continuing their seasonal decline and half being classed as normal at the end of June. Reservoir stock, says the Environment Agency, decreased at nearly 3/4 of sites during June, with England as a whole ending the month of June with just 75% of storage. The hope is, of course, that leading with this on the Farmers Weekly podcast, Hugh, that it will start to rain.
Yeah, you'd hope it would. And in the past, when we've got excited about drought, it starts raining. But I'm looking at my 2-week screen now, and there was a blip. We got this mega heat this weekend, kicking up to sort of, it's going to peak on Friday, 30 degrees over the weekend for some of the parts of the south. And then there's a potential westerly coming in, and there was a sort of breakdown scenario cooling off as westerlies come in on the Wednesday. And there was rain on my screen, and that's in the last 24 hours, that's diminished to nothing. There's a blip around Saturday. The long range looks, particularly for the south, actually, the north long range may stand in better stead, but for the south, it looks like it's going to, continue being very dry. It's a real worry. I mean, our maize here is looking really thirsty. It had a bit of relief on the Sunday night into Monday, but that's pretty made short. Well, these 30-degree temperatures we've had the last few days has made short shrift of that, and it's looking somewhat stressed again. The other thing is having a really big impact on markets, and other factors are as well. One of the other people I caught up with at the Yorkshire show was Ted Ogden, and Ted's the auctioneer up at Skipton Auction Mart. And this is what he had to say about his store lamb sale, which took place on Wednesday.
Actually, a lot of people have said that sheep have performed really well. Lambs are coming forward in quicker numbers than last year, probably 50% up week on week. But we're faced now this week with the first store lamb sale, 3,000 store lambs in Skipton tomorrow, Wednesday. And our heartland of selling to the Vale of York and Lincolnshire, no grass, people not wanting sheep at the moment. The blue tongue situation is exacerbating it even further, where we'd then in years like this rely on Welsh buyers and Scottish buyers to take up the slack. Can't have them. So now we're left with customers really in the northwest of England who have got the grass, and they're the ones who are going to hopefully buy the lambs for the first few weeks, first few sales, while we get some rain, or hopefully, fingers crossed, in those other areas.
So you can hear there the issues. It's not just the drought, it's the knock-on of the other factors. So, for example, the blue tongue thing means that those lambs which would normally go onto the Yorkshire wolds where there's usually abundant grass, they ain't going there. They can't go north to Scotland because of blue tongue. They can't go west to Wales because of blue tongue. So the only place where there is grass at the moment is parts of the northwest. Could it be that those guys hoover it up? Who knows? They also may be concerned that if they, go through too much grazing now and they're not in a position to have, or they're confident that they're not going to want the lamb. So it's just causing all sorts of problems, as you would expect. But I think what is unique about this is the impact in the central areas, as you said, Johann, and the parts of northern England, which have not seen anything like this ever, or certainly not in living memory. And it really is causing some major concern.
Well, that's the situation in northern England, and it's arguably just as bad in Scotland, if not worse. Scotland's already had a 30,000-acre wildfire this year, with warnings that more could be to come. Here's land agent Mark Osborne.
It covered 30,000 acres in total, so there's only so much that the emergency services can do, because they've still got to be able to respond to house fires, car fires, accidents on the A9 and all that sort of thing. So it inevitably isn't the biggest priority for them, whereas house and factory fires and car crashes and things is because of human life. So although they did a really good job, the fire brigade was just brilliant, but the problem is that the scale of the fire needed just so much water, so much equipment and so much manpower, and that's why the keepers, shepherds, farmers were really the backbone of it.
And your concern, Mike, is that this could happen again?
There is absolutely no chance this will be a one-off. That is, we delude ourselves to think of that. If we think of what the weather has been like over the last few weeks, and if we think of the fact that we are getting warmer and we are getting drier, we have these tremendous variations in temperature and tremendous variations in water quantity that's coming down. So in these very, very dry times, this moorland and this upland vegetation is absolutely ripe for catching fire. And it will do so. And there's, without enormous effort, controlling those fires is just extraordinary. I mean, just finding the people who can devote day after day after day. When this fire was burning for a week, so you can imagine the same people going out with their own Argocats, fogging units, tractors, water bowsers, etc., all on other people's land, or mostly on other people's land, it is an extraordinary response. But we will get more fires because we've got the weather conditions to becoming more and more ideal for wildfires, and also vegetation management is just being reduced and reduced and reduced. And that's where government, both north and south of the border, and their conservation organisations, Nature Scot in Scotland and Natural England in England, are just so behind the curve. The problem is there is no one in those organisations who has ever either managed land like that on any scale and for any period of time, nor actually fought fires. So if you have no experience of wildfires, how on earth? I mean, you would find it very strange to have a person lambing who's never done any lambing before. They would have to be trained and they would have to be supervised. And yet we have people determining government policy who have never, ever had any experience of these situations. It's just extraordinary. And people must look at us from abroad and think, what on earth are they doing? I mean, we've got. If you go and look at where the temperature is going to be this weekend and early next week, we've got classic conditions for another wildfire, and we have got government policy enforced south of the border by Natural England, north of the border by Nature Scot, which is allowing vegetation to grow unmanaged and unchecked.
Land agent Mark Osborne warning of another wildfire possibility in Scotland. Louise, Hugh, Mark's message reinforcing the need for good and proper land management policies.
It does, and it is exactly what we said. You know, he hits the nail on the head. I love the line about, you know, you wouldn't put an inexperienced lammer in charge of a lambing shed. You know, you wouldn't put a non-cook in charge of the Ritz, etc., etc. You could have analogies going out the window everywhere. It also brings home the stuff that we talked about last week at Groundswell when I mentioned the Westminster Hall debate talking about grouse shooting, and they talked extensively about the moorland management. And the fact that you've got controlled burns, you've got controlled vegetation control, you'll have a mixture of areas. But the fact of the matter is you've got controlled vegetation, which holds carbon, which creates habitat, which does all of the things you want a productive moorland to do, as opposed to uncontrolled vegetation, trying to pretend it's, you know, 0 BC, and then boom, it goes up in smoke every 10 years when it all grows up and gets out of control, and all that carbon goes up in smoke anyway. So absolutely, yeah, it really does need some serious thought here. It's not as easy as, oh, it's fine, we'll just rewild it, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, listen to the experts, Louise.
Well, exactly. I mean, we know that we've got an awful lot of expertise out there on the ground, and yet they're not being consulted or used to make some of these very important decisions. And, you know, it's not just with wildfires, is it? We've seen the same thing happen with flooding. You know, the local people on the ground in these areas, they actually know what's going on and what needs to be done. But all too often the decisions are made you know, from a central point too far away from where the action is, if you like. So, yeah, let's use that expertise because we have got it.
Local knowledge is really important, but you actually also, because the thing with flooding is that local knowledge is really important, but so is an overall satellite view. So you actually need a marrying of the two viewpoints. You need the strategic and you need the local. And this is no different. You need the generations of moorland management skill set that's there also looked in with the overview as well. It just needs a decent plan and not one which says, just leave it alone, walk away, boom, it goes up in smoke 5 years later.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're up before sunrise, ankle deep in mud and still on your feet 12 hours later. The V12 Cotswold dealer boot is made for days like this, built for graft, comfort and conditions that change by the hour and usually for the worse. But the longer you wear them, the tougher they get. They've even been tested against the biggest boots in the game, and not only did they hold up, they won hands down. No gimmicks, just boots that do their job so you can do yours. The V12 Cotswold gets tougher with age. Tested by Sartre using TM180 2016 methodology.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, the new boss at Britain's biggest supermarket has been out on farm saying he wants a closer relationship with farmers. Tesco Chief Executive Ashwin Prasad says investing in UK agriculture and providing long-term certainty for farmers is vital to deliver for producers, consumers and the environment. I went along and joined Ashwin on his farm visit and I asked him what it was all about.
Well, first of all, I mean, it's a really important part of what we do. Food security, feeding the nation, it starts with our food producers, our growers and our farmers. So actually, I couldn't think of anything better than in my first week as UK CEO coming out to one of the farms and understanding what it is that our farmers are doing in order to not just continue to produce food for our consumers, but find ways to do that sustainably into the future. And I thought that that was an inspiring way to start my first week, and I'm glad we were able to do that.
You've got your UK Greenprint report that reflecting the challenges, I guess, that you face as a supermarket, as Britain's biggest buyer of food and farming produce. Farmers are also under pressure to do stuff more environmentally friendly. How do we marry those two things together?
I think one of the things that was fundamental out of the Greenprint report is it's not just sustainability from an environmental point of view. You need economic sustainability and certainty for farmers and farming communities as well, for lots of reasons. We talk about food security. Food security means that you need farming families, farmers to feel incentivized, to have the clarity and the certainty to continue to invest, to do what it is that we appreciate them doing and have done for generations. So that's definitely one thing out of the Greenprint report that is really important. I think the other thing is the challenges around innovation, the cost burden, when you quite rightly point out it can be difficult to make a living out of farming and then also have to make these investment decisions. How do you get some certainty, take some of the risk away from those big things that could drive efficiency to make your farming business even more efficient and effective and definitely more sustainable and more environmentally friendly? 70% of farmers, over 70% of them would want to do that. But they also say that things like the cost of innovation gets in the way. So if we can help through something like the low carbon farms that we've got here, the 2 trial ones, as well as our Tesco sustainable farming groups, trial concepts to take that risk out and then take proven practical applications for farmers to scale, that helps give them a bit more certainty, take away that burden of cost on innovation. So 2 things out of the report that hopefully we're acting on today.
You seem to be saying that this sort of stuff can make good business sense. It can be good for the environment as well. Good business sense not only for Tesco but for your farmers, suppliers. But it's cost neutral perhaps for consumers, for shoppers. They needn't necessarily be paying more. It works for everybody, a win-win-win.
I think it needs to. I think we have to find a way to do that. Consumers expect us to solve the problems that they're really grappling with, whether it is over-packaging, whether it is sustainability, health. They need us to come up with those solutions because they're already under pressure. You know, families around the UK are already under pressure and they need help to help them not just to survive but to thrive. That means we have to find ways in collaboration, technologies, things like this to discover those solutions, then work really hard to turn them into cost-neutral innovations that we pass on to consumers. That's got to be the key, but done well, that's brilliant for the brand of British agriculture and food in this country because we set the standard that everybody else looks to follow. And I think that that's something we should aspire to, something we should lead for in the UK.
The name of this project, or your farms, your low carbon concept farms, you've deliberately not chosen no carbon. You're not talking about net zero. It's about doing things better. That's a deliberate choice rather than sort of aiming for net zero across the piece.
It was very deliberate because we want to be practical. We want to show that every little can help. And we've clearly set an ambition ourselves as a company to say get to net zero by 2050. But I think by saying here are some things that help you reduce the level of emissions that you have in your farming practice is what we want to focus on rather than what may seem like an unattainable target for some people.
I like the way you said that every little can help you. Only a week into the job, already on message, fully on message. Can you give me an example of what you're actually doing for farmers? Some of our listeners will say, Tesco, they're a big player. We're the small guys here. It's really, really difficult for us to make a living. Now you're asking us to do more stuff. Can you give me an example of this sort of partnership approach, I guess?
Well, I think the first thing to say on that is the Green Print report was not something that Tesco is Tesco's voice. That is, the Green Print report is the voice of farmers. We held listening groups up and down the country. We spoke directly to farmers in focus groups, and we got what it is that they are struggling with. And actually, as I said, a large percentage of farmers want to farm more sustainably. They know that these things are important for consumers, and there's an intrinsic link between what they do and what consumers want. So it's not something that Tesco is pushing as a burden to farmers. It's something Tesco is responding to against the voice of the farming community and trying to find a way to help them achieve that through concepts like the low carbon concept farms.
And final question then, you've had a good look round today. You've met some good suppliers, some good growers, everything from peas, potatoes, wheat. What's impressed you most? What's your sort of take home? What are you going to go home this evening and tell people about?
There's been so many things today that have been really inspiring innovations. From a product point of view, the purple sprouting broccoli, which was featured as a indigenous British product, I think that I was inspired by that. I think from an innovation point of view, the low carbon fertilizers and the impact that's having on performance, when you look at the control group is really encouraging. The crops look really similar, and I was really encouraged by that.
Ashwin, thank you very much. As Tesco Chief Executive Ashwin Prasad, less than a week into the job, out on farm and recognising the importance of agriculture.
So, Johann, you went up to Lincolnshire and you were at the Tesco low carbon concept farm, the one that's mostly based on potatoes. What was that experience like?
Yeah, well, Louise, it was really interesting, if a little bizarre. This was a visit hosted by T.H. Clements at Langwick Farm near Boston. And for me, it was, I had to go along because it's on home turf, really, being a Lincolnshire lad. And it was a fascinating visit. I got there, a sweltering hot day. There was a bridge across a dike by the farmyard, and I walked across it. The bridge was actually made from old recycled potato boxes. I walked across it into the field where they put up a marquee, and they brought together farmers, growers, Tesco suppliers with the Tesco agriculture team, and we had a really, really good discussion. And Ashwin Prasad was contributing to that discussion, and it was all about looking at innovative ways to make farming more sustainable, reduce emissions, make the job more resilient and more profitable too. So we're talking about things like more efficient irrigation, reducing emissions from fertiliser, better crop establishment methods. And we're talking to Tesco Chief Executive Ashwin Prasad in what is really a big white tent in the middle of a field in Lincolnshire. So it was quite odd, but really, really enlightening too.
And as I understand it, Johann, they are saying that they are going to test some of the technology and some of the innovation in a practical farm setting so that they can get a better understanding of what actually does work and if you like, what's worth the money. And then they're going to share that with their farmer suppliers and wider to the industry as well, I think. Is that right?
Exactly right, Louise. And as I put it to Ashwin, this isn't just about Tesco. And no, it's not. It's about the whole supply chain. So after the discussion, we were driven around to various parts of the farm, looking at various different technologies. One of them's a liquid product called R-Leaf, which was described to me as almost like AdBlue for ag chems. You mix it with your sprays, put it on the crop, and it reduces emissions from wheat or whatever you might be using it for. And we looked at wheat and potatoes and broccoli. So field scale veg was a big part of this visit, and how growers are working with Tesco to Yes, that word again, resilience, build resilience into the farming operation, but doing so in a way that's not just good for the environment and reducing, say, Tesco's Scope 3 emission obligations, but it also makes sense for farmers as well. And I think that's a real challenge, and that's what they want to crack. And they're coming up with these various trials, doing them in real world farming situations, seeing what works. And then the idea is that if they do work, they'll roll them out across the Tesco supply chain and then across the industry, the wider industry as well.
So it is really all about reducing emissions. And I know they call it a low carbon concept farm. Obviously, Tesco are going to benefit from that just as much as the farmers are, but it is the supply chain working together.
It is about the supply chain working together. This is not about piling costs on farmers. This is finding a way that works for farmers, or ways that work for farmers. And much of it is based on a report that Tesco published earlier this year, produced in collaboration with Harper Adams University. So more than 300 farmers looking at the sustainability of the industry. And 74% of them worried about the impact of climate change, as we've just heard, in terms of drought, in terms of wildfire, and also other times a year about concern about flooding as well. And 3/4 of farmers saying that they've not been able to implement all of the environmental measures that they want to implement so that they're prepared for the future, or to be fair, even prepared for what's happening here and now. And the barriers are often the high upfront costs associated with these mitigation measures, and also the low financial returns that we often see in farming. And I have to say, this lack of policy certainty from the government, which makes farmers understandably reluctant to invest in their own businesses because they don't know what the future holds from a government point of view.
The whole idea, I suppose, is about trying to de-risk as much as possible. We've seen it with Tesco over the years with their dairy supply chain, their TSDG, Tesco Sustainable Dairy Supply Chain. I suppose this is taking it a level further, starting with the environmental impact, and hopefully that leads to a more stable environment when it comes to the financials for everyone involved in the chain.
Yeah. Obviously, it's going to have advantages for Tesco, but Tesco say they're playing the long game. Ashwin Prasad saying he's looking at what works for farmers because Tesco needs a resilient supply chain, and it's a win-win. So if it works, there will be benefits on all sides, and there'll be benefits for the environment as well, and indeed for consumers. So I know supermarkets sometimes get a bad rap from farmers, but it's good to see retailers and producers, in this case, working together, a really positive story.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly Podcast. Welcome along wherever you're listening to us from. You can email us, podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. Louise, a busy week for you this week.
Yes, I've had a busy week, and it's been a really good week, really interesting week, actually. Started with a very interesting farm visit down on the Surrey-Hampshire border. It was a organised farm walk, organised by Base UK. But one of the really interesting bits about it was that they have a vineyard on the farm. It's actually a regenerative vineyard. It was established in 2019, I think it was, and they are growing the vines, the grapes, in a slightly different way to what you're used to seeing when you picture a vineyard. So they are growing these vines on wider rows, and so because of that, they use a very different trellis system. It's known as the Scott Henry trellis system. So that allows for more, improved sunlight and wind flow getting through to the grapes. So there's a gap of 4 meters between the rows, and then that area is planted with cover crops. And one of the things that they've been trying out and working around is just using spring barley, growing it between the rows of vines. And then what they do is they roll it and crimp it, and that forms a cover obviously on that soil, and they've really been able to protect the vines from very high soil temperatures. So that's working well. Simon Porter, whose vineyard it was, and in fact, all of the Porter family are involved in the farm and in the business. He describes it as a scruffy vineyard, but actually it all looked fantastic this week. And, in that lovely sunshine, it's a great time of year, isn't it, for viewing farms? So it didn't look too scruffy to me. It looked fabulous. And it was, as I say, really interesting to see what they're doing.
Interesting as well, Louise. You talk about it's a regen vineyard because we've got an organic one down the road from us. It does a wonderful job, but it's everything in it because they obviously don't want any long vegetation to keep all the dew down so they don't get mildew on the grapes, etc. Everything is manicured to within literally a millimetre of its life. So there is no habitat, there is nothing. Whereas it sounds like this is very different indeed.
Yeah, it is different. I mean, obviously on these wider rows, they've got more room for, if you like, for that vegetation, for it not causing problems. So, I mentioned that they're growing spring barley in between the rows, but they're also trying out other things. So they're doing a sort of vetch, Phacelia, clover type mix as well. They've also done a cereal blend of oats with barley and rye. So, yeah, there's plenty of vegetation in the vineyard, and they have actually achieved certification as a regenerative vineyard. So, good for them. They're keeping moving forward. There's a winery on the farm as well. So that's where the grapes end up, and then they're bottled, and it was absolutely delicious.
So while Louise has been wine tasting in Hampshire, Hugh, you were up at the Great Yorkshire Show.
Yes, I was up at the Yorkshire Show. In fact, I've never been to the Yorkshire Show before, and I decided to go this year, and it's just fantastic. It is a fantastic show. Loads going on, loads of people, and just can't speak highly enough about it, really. And despite, particularly on the stock side, some of the restrictions because of the blue tongue, so there was no Scotch entries, no Welsh entries. Still an amazing turnout of stock at every level, and the show itself, loads of machinery there. A really good show, really useful show. Loads of people, again, loads of ideas, and in glorious Harrogate. Harrogate's a wonderful place, isn't it? And then they've got this showground, and what a showground! I can't talk. It's brilliant, excellent. There you go. Yeah, so good show. Then came back home to a bit of a crunch with the topper. Had managed to burn out a clutch on one of its drives. And then starts the whole ridiculous parts saga that you can't get. So I requested one of these discs, friction discs that goes in the clutch through through AF, buying the parts through Anglia Farmers. They assigned the job to Tuckwells, who phoned up the topper manufacturers. And they said, we don't have any of these slip clutch things available till something like August the 20th. And they're not massively expensive. They're like, I don't know, somewhere between 30 and 60 quid each. They're pretty common. And in the end, I cannot speak highly enough about Tuckwells and Tony in the parts department at Wallingworth, who found and located alternative supplies of these parts, which you would have thought the manufacturer would want to sell you and support the people that have purchased from the manufacturer. But no, Tony saved the day and found the right clutch parts. So well done, Tony. And we should be hopefully back up and running tomorrow when it's all dispatched overnight. But it is daft that you cannot, there's just not a full parts inventory available in the UK of what is a ridiculously common machine. There are plenty of them, without giving too much about whose it is and what it is. There are plenty of them on farms all over the country, and they don't have the damn parts for them. It's bonkers. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. But Tony saved the day. Thank you, Tony.
Tony of Tuckwells, thank you very much. Look, if anyone out there listening has got a good story to tell about parts suppliers or after-sales service, particularly at this time of year, do get in touch with us, podcast@fwi.co.uk, or as we say, if you're in the UK itself, message us by texting the word farm, followed by your message to 88440. We'd love to hear some good stories about the whole industry working together, about people going above and beyond at harvest, keeping those wheels rolling.
Absolutely. Above and beyond anywhere in the supply chain, because it's the parts, whether it's parts or service, just service in general. And there are some fantastic people out there delivering amazing service, just as the farmers are delivering amazing product. There are a lot of people in the chain that help them to get there. And yeah, we need to recognise them because, like you say, they're well, without it doesn't work, does it? And do you know what? When someone does that, it's just the best thing ever, isn't it?
Yeah, lots and lots of good stories out there. Louise, some people, though, suggesting that some of these stories are too good, are boasting about yields at harvest.
Oh, well, we have these comments every year, don't we? The Farmers Weekly magazine does quite a bit of harvest reporting, and there is always a real mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this season will be no different to that. However, people always take exception to some of the reports that are in Farmers Weekly, not all of them, and reckon that there's some pub yields and boasting that goes on. Look, I think this is all a bit unfair. We know there's going to be variation across the piece. So I think all of those stories will get covered in time. So just, wait and see what comes up. And don't forget that last year they all talked it all down so much and said it was going to be so bad that all the end users and processors went off and bought their grain from other countries. And I don't think the grain markets have ever recovered since then. So, just keep quiet and we'll see how it all unfolds.
It could be a surprising one. You never know.
And talking of grain markets, Hugh, any surprises in this week's commodity prices?
Well, we'll start with the cattle price. Johann, finished steer deadweight average this week has edged up 0.2 of a penny to 634 pence a kilo. The finished steer live weight SQQ 364.9. That has also gone up about 7p on the week. If we go to the sheep rings, the lamb SQQ this week has actually dropped back a little bit, 734.5, back from 748.2 last week. The live weight's also dropped back a little bit by about 4p to 341.6. Pig price edges up 0.2 of a penny, SPP 207.6. And then on to the arable markets, not quite as depressing as last week. Feed wheat, though, I'm afraid has gone back a couple of quid, £157.20. Milling wheat stands on at 182 dead, so no change there. Just to make you feel sick, a year ago it was £236.10p, the spot price this week on milling wheat. Feed barley has actually gained a bit this week. So £140.30, up from 138 last week. Oilseed rape, that has also gained about 8 quid. That's up to 390.50. It's 8 quid exactly. Feed peas go back 3 quid, 210.30. Feed beans have dropped back about 7 quid, £215.30. Diesel price has gone up, though. That's not such good news. 70 pence, 70.19 pence per litre on a Wednesday morning ring round this week. That is up. It's actually up just under 2p a litre on the week. So not such good news there.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, we've heard lots about the downsides and challenges of climate change in this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast, but there are some opportunities too. We've heard about grapes and vineyards, of course, but Lincolnshire grower David Hoyles has gone a step further and planted a 10-hectare olive grove. Louise went along to meet him.
So what are you doing at the moment, David?
We're doing a bit of pruning and a bit of taping up, so walking up and down lots of lines of olive trees, and as the trees grow we want to tape them to a support stake so the wind doesn't bend them over or snap them. And then the ones that have grown a bit more, then we're trimming the length of the branches to encourage them to do more branching, and then we get more flowering sites. So trimming, pruning and taping up, and once you get through one variety block, then it's pretty much time to come back and start again.
So some of these trees are flowering at the moment and some of them very much aren't. Is that a variety thing?
Yeah, it is very much a variety thing. So we've got 10 varieties in here, 4 main blocks of varieties, which we've got quite a few thousand trees of each. And then we've got 6 other varieties where we've got a few less. So I've tried to choose varieties that are going to flower slightly later in the year, so they didn't get burnt off by a potential April frost. But I've also tried to choose varieties that will mature early so that they produce their fruit and hopefully a harvestable fruit before winter sets in.
And what are we standing on, David? We're in a row here between, I think it's 4 metres between the rows of trees. And there's grasses, clovers. Is this a special mix you've put in between the trees?
Yeah, this is a 3 metre bed of wildflowers in a grass mix. So we did look at the species of the wildflowers in particular to try and encourage beneficial insects for native pests that we have on the pest list that are major pests in the Mediterranean. So we've got Bird's-foot trefoil, we've got pink and red clover, we've got oxeye daisy, we've got plantain. But not only is it trying to encourage the beneficials, it also makes the site look pretty smart, particularly now as everything's flowering. It's not a monoculture of lots of thousands of trees in lines. We've actually got quite a nice environment here. We've got brown hares hopping in front of us. We've flushed up some English partridge. The oyster catchers were flying overhead earlier. There's a lot of wildlife here. We've got the pollinators themselves, little bees, honeybees, bumblebees. It's a really nice place to be.
Yeah, and I mean, this hot sunny day, perfect conditions with these trees. They seem to be growing very quickly. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, they've enjoyed this year slightly more than last year. Last year we had very poor sunlight. I think when our solar panels were 19-20% down year on the 10-year average. This year's been the opposite. We've had nice, warm, dry weather. The trees have grown massively. I think they've grown more in these first 3 months than what they grew the whole of last year. So yeah, they're feeling probably more at home. And actually, it's slightly more rewarding because in the first year, I was just thinking how many more are going to die. But this year, I can see them flowering. Some are ending flowering. We can now see little baby olives starting to grow. So yeah, really encouraging and rewarding for mine, my wife's, the team's efforts going up and down, spending hundreds of hours in here. But on a day like today, it's a pretty special place to be.
It is, and I think you did say how many kilometres of fertigation tube, if that's the right word, that you put in. But
yeah, we've got 2.4 kilometres of permanent trickle tape. So each little outlet, every 60 centimetres, there's a drip outlet. They've got a pressure valve there, so that we put the same amount of drips of water one end of the road as what we do to the other end. So it's all precision regulated, controlled by an app. And then we're putting in fertiliser, some organic and some man-made, at different times of the plant's growing cycle. So pre-flowering, we're now just at fruit initiation. So we'll be giving it different nutrition that my amigos and my michis from Spain and Italy that are helping me with a bit of Google Translate. They're sort of suggesting what we might want to be putting on to help the trees grow.
Lincolnshire grower David Hoyle's growing and harvesting olives near Spalding. So Louise, olives in Lincolnshire fens about as far away from Tuscany in terms of landscape as you can possibly get.
Yes, it is. But, there's good reason for that. The land that David's put his olive grove on, that is more traditionally associated with vegetable growing. It's very, very good land, if you like, whereas olive groves are traditionally grown on that rather rocky soil down in the south of Europe. But, olive production is moving. David was quite clear about that. He's spent quite a bit of time in Europe looking at olive production, and it is slowly coming north because, of course, there's a water issue and there's also an extreme heat issue. So, olives aren't growing as well as they used to in their traditional heartland. So they are starting to move, and he would be out over in Europe looking at vegetable crops, and he'd think, why on earth are they growing olives near to these? And he'd then go and ask the question and was told, well, we're having to move where we grow them now. So that really gave him the idea, and he's gone ahead and planted a 10-hectare olive grove on his farm in Long Sutton near Spalding.
And just in terms of the soil, Louise, I mean, this is traditional vegetable soils, as we said, near Spalding. Does that mean the vegetable production's got to go out to Scotland and Lincolnshire's going to become olive oil capital of Western Europe?
No, I don't think it means that. I mean, David is still growing potatoes and he's growing sugar beet and he's growing peas and he's growing mustard. So there's other crops happening as well. This is, if you like, part of future-proofing of the business. And, I really take my hat off to him because there are obviously quite a lot of risks attached to doing something like this. And, they're frost hardy, the varieties that he's growing, but, a late spring frost, as we know, with whatever fruit you might be growing, can, if the trees or bushes are flowering at the time, that can cause problems. So, there are risks attached if we have late frosts, and also he's got to get them matured in time and harvested and in before the weather deteriorates. At the other end of the season. So, this is not for the faint-hearted, and he says it's a long-term and expensive project, and there are quite a lot of risks. But he's giving it a really good go, and I think it's fantastic, and it was a really interesting visit up there, actually.
So lots of risk, lots of investment, but David must be convinced, Louise, that this is going to work.
Well, I think he's as convinced as he can be, and on the bit about mitigating the risk, because he has always grown potatoes and vegetables up on that farm, he has got irrigation. And in fact, they have got 3 reservoirs on the farm. Now, he has installed this trickle fertigation in this olive grove. So the trees are getting the water and the nutrition very precisely and as they need it and according to growth stage and all the rest of it. So David's always embraced technology. That's been quite a big part of what they do on that farm. So he's got this real precision irrigation. He's got these soil probes. It's all linked up, works by app. And so he has obviously tried to take some of the risk out with that. He's growing them for olive oil production, not for table olives. So I think that's quite an important distinction, really. And in due course, the harvest this year will be very, very small, but in due course, he will be pressing them, if that's the right word. I'm not sure. It might be crushing them and then filtering them and bottling the olive oil. So we'll look forward to seeing what that's like. That'll be the first English olive oil that you can buy. And he has set up a website. He's going to hopefully sell direct. It's a crop that he wants to have more control over and be involved with the marketing of it much more. So that's what the route he's decided to go down with that. I'm quite sure in time it'll be in local farm shops and probably used in restaurants as well. So, fantastic. As I said, having the water on the farm definitely helps. Having their sort of precision and technology focus will also help. David's farm is quite well known for being really very productive, so I'm sure he'll give it his best shot.
Yeah, I'm sure David will give it his best shot too. And that's about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. Another hot one. Do take care out there. We wish you all the best with harvest, but do take extra care in this heat. We hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like what you've heard, please do leave us a 5-star review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening.